The velvet box made a soft sound when I set it down, but it felt louder than the entire restaurant. Neither of them looked at it. She stared at me with this expression like I'd just walked into the wrong movie. He didn't even stop chewing. For a second, I thought I might pass out. Not from heartbreak or anger, from the sheer weirdness of it. The way they both just sat there, calm as anything. As if this was a normal Wednesday, and not the moment everything cracked open. I said, "You could at least pretend to be shocked." Still nothing. She picked up her wine glass, took a sip, tilted her head at me like I was the intruder. You ever feel like your brain is trying to sprint and drown at the same time? That was me. I looked down at the ring, the one I'd had custom made, the one with the engraving she never noticed because she never opened the box. He finally spoke. "Do you need something, man?" Not "who are you?" Not "why are you here?" Just that. Like I was interrupting their appetizer. I stood there, realizing every pair of eyes in the place was on me. And all I could think about, not the betrayal, not the months of lies, not the fake work calls or cold shoulders, was that the waiter still hadn't brought my bread. I opened my mouth to say something clever, or devastating, or maybe scream. But instead I said, "Table 7 had a reservation for 2. You're not on it." She looked away. He chuckled. And I left. Walked straight out into the cold with no jacket, no plan, and a credit card bill in my pocket with 2 plane tickets she never mentioned. First class. Departure date, tomorrow. But here's the part that'll really mess with your head. That ring, it wasn't meant for her. Not anymore. The wind outside nearly ripped the receipt from my hand. The receipt I never meant to keep, but grabbed in a panic after realizing I'd left my phone on the table. I didn't go back for it. I couldn't. She didn't follow me. Neither did he. I stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes, just watching the fog crawl across the streetlights and wondering what the hell I'd just done. That moment inside the restaurant. Her eyes on me like I was the embarrassment, the interruption. It wasn't the betrayal that stung the most. It was the complete lack of surprise. Like she'd planned for this. Like I'd walked into a rehearsal and I wasn't part of the cast. Back in the car, I stared at the ring box still tucked in my coat pocket. It had weight to it now. Not just metal. History. Regret. And something else I couldn't name yet. Because like I said, the ring wasn't meant for her. Not anymore. I'd made up my mind 2 weeks earlier. I was going to leave her. Quietly. No drama. I didn't want revenge, didn't want to burn the house down. I just wanted out. I even picked an apartment across town, signed the lease under a fake name just so she wouldn't see any paperwork lying around. I'd packed some of my clothes in boxes labeled donations. It was all set. But then something changed. I found the tickets. 2 of them. Booked in my name. Charged to our joint account. Except I hadn't booked them. And the passenger listed next to me? Her. Same last name. Same birthday. A trip to Italy. The place she always begged me to take her, but I never made time. I thought maybe it was her way of saving us. One final effort. Maybe she was trying, in her own way. Maybe she still loved me. So I delayed my exit. Gave her the benefit of the doubt. Got the ring resized, re-engraved, and decided to try one more time. But it turns out, she was planning a trip. Just not with me. The ticket in my name? Fake. The second one, hers, was real. The destination was a decoy. The booking confirmation was found in the trash, but her real plans were saved in her phone under a calendar event labeled Consulting Retreat. I know because I checked. After I left the restaurant, I parked 2 blocks away from home, sat in the dark, and hacked into her tablet. It was too easy. She never changed her passwords. She didn't think she had to. The retreat wasn't in Italy. It was in a lake house upstate. And guess whose name popped up under attendees? Yeah, him. The man at the table. The guy who asked me if I needed something. Turns out I did. I needed the truth. I needed to stop pretending this wasn't happening. And, maybe, I needed to make sure they both understood what it feels like to be planned around. Rehearsed. Erased. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even go home. I drove to a gas station, bought a burner phone, a roll of duct tape I didn't need, and a notebook I'd fill with everything I was going to do next. Because the ring wasn't for her. It was part of the plan. And the next time she saw it would be the last time she ever saw me the same way again. The lake house was 3 hours away, nestled in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine and silence. The kind of place people go to unplug, but really just want to be forgotten. I stared at the address for hours that night, imagining it in the cold, imagining them inside it. imagining her wrapping herself in a blanket someone else handed her. I don't know what snapped exactly. Maybe it was the thought that she'd chosen that place, the one we once looked at on Zillow as a fantasy. Too remote, I told her. Too quiet. Turns out, that's what she wanted all along. Quiet enough to hide in. Remote enough that no one would come looking. By the time I drove home at sunrise, I'd already committed to the plan. But not the kind of revenge you see in movies. Nothing violent or illegal or YouTube demonetizable. No, something colder. Smarter. Deeper. She was asleep when I walked in. Her coat was tossed carelessly over a chair, and her shoes, new ones, heels I hadn't seen before, were neatly aligned by the door. I stared at them for a minute, wondering if that man had helped her take them off, wondering if she laughed while he did. The kitchen smelled like mint tea. The mug was still warm. She had gotten home late, very late, and made tea to unwind. No guilt, no panic, just the comfort of secrets well kept. I sat on the couch and waited. I didn't know for what, exactly, maybe for some kind of guilt to bloom inside me for what I was about to do. But it didn't come. Instead, I did something worse. I opened her laptop. I installed a screen recorder, synced her iCloud to my backup server. I didn't just want to catch her lying. I wanted to understand her lies. The rhythm, the structure, how she breathed through them without blinking. Within 2 days, I had what I needed. Messages. So many messages. But here's the twist. They weren't just between her and him. There was a third name. A woman. Not a friend. Not a coworker. Someone I'd never heard of. Someone she called V. And suddenly, the narrative began to shift in ways I hadn't expected. Because V wasn't a stranger to this affair. She was advising it. Encouraging it. Feeding it. Like some puppet master in the background, pulling threads I didn't know existed. There were messages like, "Don't back out now. You've come this far. He's too dull to notice anyway. Just keep him distracted until next weekend. Use the ring. If he's that desperate, it's leverage." That last one hit like a bullet between my ribs. The ring. My ring. She knew. Somehow, she knew I was going to propose again, or pretend to. And instead of being touched, instead of second-guessing, she weaponized it. They planned for it. Counted on it. And V, whoever she wasn't just a friend. Her tone was too clinical. Too precise. Like she'd done this before. That's when the panic started to set in. Not because I feared I'd lose my wife. That part was over. But because I realized I didn't know who I was dealing with anymore. This wasn't just betrayal. It was manipulation at a level I didn't understand yet. There were layers to this. People behind the curtain. And I wasn't the only one being lied to. That man from the restaurant? The one she sat with so confidently? He didn't know about V. He didn't know about me either. Not really. I found that out when I traced his name through her Venmo history. His full name. His work address. His marriage. Yes, he was married too. And from what I could tell, he wasn't aware that he was also just a piece in her little game. Now the question wasn't how I'd confront her. It was when. And more importantly, how many people would I take down with me when I did? I had never heard her name spoken aloud in our house, not once. No photos, no comments, not even casual gossip, which now struck me as strange. Kendra gossiped about everyone. But V? She didn't exist until she existed everywhere. The more I searched, the more her fingerprints showed up. An account she followed from a burner Instagram. A backup email address linked to a few password resets. An Uber ride 2 months ago, picked up from downtown at 2 a.m., destination listed simply as V's. And then, a recurring $112.50 charge on our shared credit card labeled only Solstice Studio. I almost didn't check it. It sounded like a yoga place. But something about the amount, always the same, always monthly, made me dig. Turns out, Solstice Studio wasn't for yoga. It was a private counseling firm. Only 3 therapists on staff. One of them, Valerie M., known to her clients simply as V. Now this is where things start getting slippery. You might think I went into a full conspiracy spiral. And you'd be right. I did. I printed pages, I drew diagrams, I ran keyword matches on phone logs. It was like I was possessed, trying to map a person who shouldn't even be on my radar. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized. This wasn't some side character in Kendra's affair. V wasn't just her therapist. She was her handler, her mentor, her shadow. In the session logs I hacked from the Solstice portal, God forgive me, I know I crossed lines here, I found something called emotional retraining. A euphemism, really. It was described as an empowerment protocol to help clients reframe toxic partnerships by designing new emotional ecosystems, whatever that means. The key thing was this. One of the listed methods was emotional severance rehearsal. That's where things got deeply uncomfortable. One of the documents, anonymized but clearly written by V, described a scenario eerily close to mine. A client married 7 years, partner emotionally distant, subject reporting strong attachment avoidance and a need for validation. The suggested treatment? Run parallel validation pathways. Prepare patient to detach without confrontation. Use performative closure, gift, trip, symbolic farewell to manufacture clean emotional split. The gift was the ring. The trip was the lake house. And the symbolic farewell was me. Kendra wasn't just having an affair. She was being coached into leaving me. Clinically, systematically, like I was a tumor she needed to have removed cleanly with no scar tissue. But here's the real twist. V didn't stop at coaching. She had met with Kendra outside of the sessions. Twice. Once at a bar, once at a hotel conference center during a relationship boundaries seminar. But then came the kicker. A blurry CCTV still from the hotel lobby. I only found it because V had posted it herself months ago on an old Facebook account, long before she locked everything down. There were 2 women in the shot. One I couldn't quite identify, and the other? The other was Kendra, standing beside her, smiling, like they weren't therapist and client, like they were friends, or maybe something else entirely. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something that hadn't hit me yet. Fear. Because now I didn't know who was playing who. Was Kendra the patient? Or the participant? Was this emotional manipulation? Or was it something darker? And if V had helped her get rid of me? Who had V helped her get rid of before? I don't know what pushed me to go digging through the old laptop in the basement. It was barely functioning, something I hadn't touched since before our son was born. Kendra used it mostly back then, late nights doing freelance editing projects, or, as she claimed, journaling. I didn't question it. I should have. The power cord was frayed and wrapped in electrical tape. The machine whined like an old engine as it booted. I remember just sitting there on the basement floor, surrounded by half-sealed boxes we'd meant to unpack 2 houses ago, watching the login screen flicker and thinking, if this thing still works, maybe I'm meant to see what's on it. It took 20 minutes to bypass the admin password. Kendra never used anything complicated. Her first dog's name, every time. Once I got in, I expected to find what you'd expect. Drafts of emails, notes to herself, a few recipes maybe. But what I found instead was a folder tucked deep into the documents directory. It was labeled CF. At first I thought it was nothing. CF could mean anything: color filter, camera folder, client files. But when I opened it, the first document made my chest tighten. It was a scanned police report, dated August 2016. Cedar Falls, Iowa. The victim, Janelle Avery. Age, 34. Found unconscious in a locked bathroom at a rural conference center. No witnesses. No suspects. A file note stated the presence of anxiety medication, a cracked cell phone screen, and bruising on the left side of her face. She survived, barely, but refused to cooperate with authorities afterward. No charges were ever filed. The case went cold. There were more files beneath that one. News articles, downloaded PDFs, even grainy forum posts. All related to that incident. All hyper-focused. Too focused. Like whoever compiled them wasn't just interested, they were obsessed. And then I saw it. A name buried inside one of the articles, almost a throwaway line. A source familiar with the retreat said that a guest named Kendra M. had attempted to call 911 before the phone line was abruptly cut off. I blinked. Reread it. Kendra was there. The retreat? A wellness seminar hosted by, you guessed it, Solstice Studio. It didn't make sense. She'd never mentioned visiting Iowa, let alone being involved in something like that. She'd never mentioned Janelle. But then again, Kendra didn't mention a lot of things. I kept scrolling, heart racing, until I reached an email export labeled Auto Forward Archive. Inside were hundreds of messages routed through her old Gmail. I began scanning them rapidly, looking for anything that referenced the incident, or V, or even the name Cedar Falls. Then one subject line caught my eye. You promised silence. It was from an address I didn't recognize. Sent exactly 2 months ago. The body of the email was only one sentence. You said it would never happen again. He's getting close. Handle it. Or I will. No name. No sign-off. But it was forwarded directly to V's inbox less than a minute later. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Kendra cheating. It wasn't even just about emotional manipulation. This was about containment. Control. Someone, either Janelle, or someone who knew her, or someone else entirely, was watching, waiting, threatening. And V was the one receiving the updates. I shut the laptop, sat in the silence of that basement with the air tasting like dust and old carpet glue, wondering just how deep this thing went. I had walked into this thinking I was the abandoned husband in a predictable story of betrayal. The sad guy who got left behind while his wife ran off with some smooth-talking stranger. But what if I wasn't just the guy being left? What if I was the newest loose end? There was something strange about driving to a place you've only ever seen in someone else's plans. You feel like an intruder, sure, but more than that, you feel like the setting is judging you for being the wrong person arriving. The sky was overcast when I got there. Gray, unflinching. Clouds heavy like they knew something I didn't. The house itself wasn't grand, but it was isolated. Far too isolated for what it claimed to be, a retreat. 2 stories of cabin-style woodwork, moss gathering on the shingles, a crooked weather vane spinning lazily on the roof. The driveway wasn't paved, just a scar in the earth. And there were no cars. I sat for 10 minutes, engine running, wondering whether I was ready for what might be inside. But I knew there wouldn't be another opportunity. Kendra and her consulting trip weren't scheduled for another week, which meant if she or V had been here recently, they'd left traces. And if they hadn't, maybe the house itself had something to say. I broke in through the side. The lock was old, flimsy. I didn't even have to damage it. It welcomed me like I belonged there, like it was tired of keeping secrets. Inside, it was colder than expected. Not just physically, emotionally cold. The kind of cold that sits under your skin and makes the back of your neck tighten. There were blankets draped over furniture, but everything was meticulously arranged. Framed quotes about release and freedom hung crooked on the walls, as if someone had tried too hard to make the place feel tranquil and forgot that humans live in straight lines. But the strangest thing? There were no clocks. Not one. I checked every room. Bedroom, kitchen, the hallway, even the oven, where the digital display had been blacked out with tape. The microwave, too. Every reflective surface turned inward or removed. Mirrors faced the walls. Phones unplugged. It wasn't just isolation. It was disorientation. Whoever used this place didn't want time to exist. The upstairs bedroom was the only room with personal touches. A stack of notebooks sat on the nightstand, all with the same sticker on the cover, a hollow triangle, like an empty warning sign. Most of the pages were filled with affirmations. Not in Kendra's handwriting, though. No, these were printed. Pre-written mantras pasted inside with glue. You are not responsible for how others break. Distance is clarity. Endings are gifts in disguise. No one deserves your unfinished self. I read each one like I was decoding a cult manifesto. Because that's what it felt like now. Not an affair, not a betrayal, but some kind of slow, methodical detachment process designed by people who treated emotion as a disease. I flipped through page after page until I found one that wasn't glued in. It was handwritten and unmistakably Kendra's. Elwood keeps looking at me like I'm someone else. I wish he'd just get angry. It would be easier to leave him if he didn't look so sad all the time. I froze. Not because of the cruelty, but because of how true it was. I had been sad. I'd been soft. Weakened. Like I deserved this somehow. Like my pain was a burden she was too evolved to carry anymore. In the drawer beneath the notebooks, I found a Polaroid. It wasn't dated. It showed Kendra sitting on a dock, wrapped in a navy blue shawl. Her eyes were closed. Her head leaned gently on the shoulder of someone standing beside her, a woman whose face had been scratched out with the tip of a pen, over and over and over again. But it wasn't rage. It was methodical, intentional, like erasure, like whoever did it wanted to remove the memory of that person completely. I turned the photo over. In faint blue ink, never again, never again, never again. 3 times. Same handwriting. Not Kendra's. I stood there holding the picture, pulse hammering in my ears, when something creaked downstairs. I froze. Not because I was afraid of being caught, but because I realized I hadn't checked the basement. And whatever was down there hadn't wanted to be found. The basement door groaned like it had secrets lodged in its hinges. I stood at the top of the stairs with my hand on the frame for what felt like an hour, breathing like I'd just outrun something I couldn't name. The air that rose up from below was damp and metallic, not the scent of mold or rot, but something older, like iron and forgotten paper. No lights, of course. I used the flashlight on my burner phone, already at 20%, already too dim for comfort. The stairs creaked with every step. Shallow. Narrow. Whoever built this place didn't want the basement used often. Or maybe they did, but only by people who already knew what was down there. And what was down there? At first glance, nothing. Just concrete walls, some exposed pipes, and a low ceiling that forced me to hunch forward. But then I turned the light left, and that's when my stomach twisted. There was a single wooden chair in the center of the room, facing a wall. A chair, and beside it, a small, rusted table with a voice recorder on top. Not digital. Analog. The kind with little cassette tapes. It was already halfway through a tape. The reels were still. I didn't want to touch it. I wanted to leave. I wanted to erase this entire place from memory. But I pressed play. At first, silence. Then static. And then, her voice. Kendra. But not the Kendra I knew. Not the polished one who texted in perfectly measured phrases, or the cold, distant one from the restaurant. This Kendra was shaking. Raw. Unfiltered. I don't know why I'm doing this again, she said. Valerie said it helps to say things out loud, even if no one ever listens. But I hate the sound of my own voice now. It feels like a stranger's. Or maybe it always was. There was a long pause, and I heard her breathing, uneven, tight, like she'd been crying. I saw Elwood yesterday. Not saw. Like passed by. I saw him. Really looked. And for a second I wondered if maybe I could just tell him everything. About Janelle. About Cedar Falls. About the blackout. But then he smiled at me like nothing was wrong, and I remembered why I started lying in the first place. He always makes me feel like I'm not allowed to shatter. Another pause. Then something strange. V says closure isn't about truth. It's about containment. She says the version of me I'm building doesn't need to explain the ruins behind her. Click. Static again. The tape cut there. I stood in the dark, that sentence bouncing around my skull like an echo in a sealed vault. Closure isn't about truth. That's what all this was. The ring. The trip. The man in the restaurant. The rehearsed detachment. It wasn't to hurt me, not directly. It was to bury me. She wanted to grieve me while I was still breathing. But then something else occurred to me. Kendra had said Valerie said. But she'd also said, I saw Elwood. Like I wasn't there. Like I wasn't part of that world anymore. Like she'd been talking about me from a place I had already been removed from. I looked around the room again, and that's when I saw the box beneath the table. A cardboard banker's box, damp from the floor, but still intact. Inside, old journals. Not Kendra's. Not Valerie's. Mine. Pages of my own handwriting. Things I'd written years ago. Thoughts I hadn't shared with anyone. Notes I'd written in private, sometimes only half legible. I flipped through one and recognized the entry immediately. It was from the night my father died. A page I had burned. How was it here? How did she have it? I flipped faster. Notes from therapy. Old dreams. Even a half-written letter I had deleted from my laptop. A letter addressed to Kendra that I never finished, let alone printed. There was only one possible answer. They'd been inside my head longer than I knew. Inside my files. Inside my life. The emotional manipulation hadn't been a reaction. It had been a construction. I wasn't just the target. I was the blueprint. I sat in that chair, knees weak, holding pieces of myself I didn't remember giving away. And then I heard a sound behind me. Upstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. The door I had left ajar creaked shut, and the lock clicked. I didn't move right away. The sound of the lock sliding into place echoed down the stairs like a final verdict, and part of me expected the lights to go out next. For a full minute, I just sat in the chair, holding the pages of my own life like they were classified documents I wasn't cleared to read. But when no one came down, when no voice called out my name, I stood. And something inside me was different. I wasn't scared. I was finished. I wasn't going to chase ghosts anymore. I wasn't going to play their game. This house, this basement, the carefully arranged files and scratched out photos. None of it had power unless I gave it meaning. And I'd been feeding it for too long. I took the journals, mine, and stuffed them into my bag. Left the recorder, left the chair. I walked up those basement stairs slower than I came down, Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't leaving anything behind this time. If someone was waiting, they'd have to deal with the version of me that understood now. But when I reached the front door, it was wide open. The lock, still intact. There were no cars, no sounds, no figures in the trees. Only wind and the sound of pine needles brushing against one another, like the house was exhaling for the first time in years. It had been a test. One final push to see if I'd break. But I didn't. On the drive home, I turned off the GPS, took the long way back through the hills, through the places Kendra and I used to pass in silence. Back when silence still felt safe. And I realized something. I didn't want answers anymore. I wanted distance. I wanted peace. And, somehow, I was finally ready for both. It's been 5 months now. Kendra moved out 2 weeks after the lake house. No grand fight. No begging. Just a quiet breakfast where she asked if I was okay, and I told her, honestly, that I was going to be. She nodded. We split the bills. The house went to market. We even laughed once, the kind of soft laugh that says, we're done pretending. I never heard from V again. Not directly. But I did get a strange letter from a law office in Cedar Falls. Something about patient confidentiality and sealed counseling records. I shredded it without reading. That world is theirs now. It doesn't belong to me. I moved to a new place. Smaller. Simpler. The kind of space where nothing echoes unless I want it to. I started journaling again, for myself this time. No audience. No manipulation. Just me. Pen to paper, rebuilding the parts that weren't broken but just forgotten. And the ring? I still have it. Not out of pain. Not out of nostalgia. But because it reminds me that I loved once. Really loved. That I gave someone everything I had. And even if they couldn't carry it. I did. I survived it. I stayed kind through it. I learned who I was in it. And now? Now I give that version of me to people who know what to do with it. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not lost. I'm just free.